before you comment on this video or any other video, watch the whole video.
What's going on, everybody? It's Willoughby's, and welcome back to the Lore Chronicles. Today, we have quite the discussion for you because the community has been pretty divided over the concept of paywalls in Disney Lorcana. To sum it up, paywalls are basically charging for some kind of exclusive content, such as deck lists or deck guides. Even coaching can fall under paywalls. So what you might want to think of are people like Zan Syed or DKP who have lists like Sapphire Steel or Ruby Sapphire that they have piloted to success in events. So then they create a deck guide basically teaching you, the purchaser or consumer, how to pilot the deck, your mulligan decisions that you're going to want to take, and all of the things that they are thinking about and have found in order to get success from that deck. Some players are really against this, arguing that information should be free for all in order for the community to be better and grow faster, while others love the idea of being able to pick Zan's brain for a small or hefty cost, depending on how you look at it, in order to improve their own game. We had a lot to say about this one, so before you get too mad, try to hear us out first. Thanks so much for watching and enjoy the discussion. Before we start this discussion, do you want to explain your little note for everyone in the beginning?
Yeah, so, I was watching the video back, make sure there's no mistakes, and I'm like 20 minutes into the video, the previous video that we put out. We haven't even gotten to our opinions yet. I'm just explaining kind of how things work, and already the comments are like, "You're an idiot. You don't ban the things in the thumbnail." As if we ever even said that in the video at all. So again, don't embarrass yourself. Watch the video for our opinion.
And maybe everyone can start understanding how clickbait works. And if you click the video, the clickbait worked. Okay. So we've got a big
gotta be done.
We've got a big discussion today. I think Burns and I are going to get ourselves into a little bit of hot water here with this one, because we are taking on a behemoth of a topic, which is paywall in Disney Lorcana. And it's been stirring up a lot of discussion lately on places like Twitter. I think even like Facebook. It's going around. A lot of people are interested in discussing
everywhere
paywalled content, similar to think like Metafy guides, right? People like Zan Syed, DKP. Honestly, a lot of these guys that are top performers have Metafy guides. And we want to be as unbiased as possible and acknowledge that Dick and I are both on teams, TFM and Team Rebirth respectively, that have put out Metafy guides. However, so there is a little bit of, you could say, bias in this discussion, but we want to be transparent with that and acknowledge it. Also, I don't know about you, I haven't made a dime from Metafy, and I will not make a dime from my team's Metafy guides. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, TFM is not directly paying you from their Metafy. So we also, while we have Metafys,
at some point that might change, but we're in the beginnings.
Right. At least right now, we want to clarify when we're making this opinion. It's easy to, if you don't watch the video, comment, well, these two people are on teams and they make money from Metafy, so I don't care what they have to say. We do not make money from Metafy. At least right now, as of the time of this recording, the two of us are not benefiting from Metafy. Okay. So that's also worth adding into the discussion. All right. So let's just get right into it. Enough of the disclaimers. Let's start with what is paywall and paywalled content, specifically in Disney Lorcana. Want to talk about that?
Yes, it's a wall that you have to pay to get through. Yes. Next question. Great.
Right. But basically, right, it's all kinds of things, like it can be deck lists. Deck guides usually have the deck list, and then they go over like, here's what you want to do on your mulligan. Here's basically, they teach you how to play the deck in the form of text. But honestly, I would even say like things like coaching and stuff kind of count as paywall, because someone could, do VOD reviews on stream for everyone to see, or sit there and do a live coaching session for everyone to watch. So anything that you have to pay in order to access the information is what we're talking about when we talk about paywall. So there's paywalled content in Disney Lorcana. I want to quickly note, is this unique to Disney Lorcana, or is this just the natural progression of TCGs as players start to win competitive circuits? Is this what you've seen in other places?
Oh yeah, this is so common everywhere. Nunez likes to quote something, I'm gonna pay this guy $5 a month for the rest of my life, and that comes from Magic, where a lot of Magic is actually just sideboard guides.
Mm.
So you're only learning about 15 cards, and they're constantly changing. But there's all kinds. Almost every card game has this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's just like it's important to quickly note and throw into the conversation. It's just that like this is a natural progression. Lorcana is just going through the stages of a normal TCG. So the problem with paywall that I've been seeing people say, right, is that a big part of it really is just like bad info, right? So I know there was a meme going around because Zan said he was like 50-0 in playtesting, and everybody was like, well, I could just throw out any number, I want and say I'm 100-0 in playtesting by my guide. So a lot of people are criticizing the idea of like advertising without statistics and facts to back it up, and with that, people who, like, I guess to quote others, who should not be creating deck guides, putting out deck guides. So basically like bad actors, bad info. You're giving somebody $10, $20 for a deck guide, and then it doesn't even have the right mulligan strategies, let's say, right? Or, people who aren't, top DLC winners, just winning a set championship or a local saying, well, here's my deck guide, pay for it, right? So there's a lot of bad info out there, is I guess what a lot of people have to say. And then the other aspect of what people are criticizing this for is they're saying that it's actually less helpful for the community when we're not all just sharing our information freely and for everyone to see, and instead we're putting it behind paywalls where it's like, well, if you want to know, about this one archetype or this one deck combination, you have to pay me, and then if you want to know about, the other strategies for this other deck, you have to pay this other person. It's not conducive to an environment where everybody is kind of working together to, let's say, solve the meta and come up with counter strategies all together. So these are the two main criticisms that I've seen when talking about paywalled content. What do you think about those two things, just as a jumping off point?
I think they don't make any sense.
Okay.
If you compare this to basically any other aspect of your life, I don't think it makes any sense. I think that top-down perspective, only focusing on trading card games specifically.
Hold on 1 second. Can you cut out for a second? Can you repeat? I think you said something about a top-down perspective. Can you just repeat that sentence?
If you look at this from a top-down perspective, only thinking about trading card games and no other aspects of your life whatsoever, then I could see the arguments. So I'm not saying these people are crazy. I'm just saying, and I experienced this actually when I made YouTube videos on buying and selling stuff for a living. So like, let's just look at buying and selling stuff for a living. There would be lists called BOLO lists, which is be on the lookout for, okay? And if you're giving up this information for stuff that you're finding at, let's say, Walmart's, right? Well, all of a sudden, if I'm making some amount of money because I'm the only person selling a specific product that no one knew about, I can use a great example, a garden hose that for some reason at Kmart, right, they were $10, but on Amazon they were $50. Okay. So one of my friends, who charged for information, was like, yeah, so, if I give out this information, there's going to be 1,000 people that go out and buy this garden hose. It's not going to be $50 on Amazon anymore, right?
Right.
Just like how if Zan would give out the deck list for free a couple days before the event, maybe he doesn't win the event, right? So it's costing him money to do so. So it makes perfect sense to me that someone should be compensated for their BOLO list, or that someone should be compensated for something that they truly think and ends up being one of the format defining decks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, kind of talking about why do people paywall, basically? Why do we have paywalled content in Disney Lorcana? And I think the long and short of it is people want to be compensated for their time and their energy and their knowledge, right? And so why would Zan charge money for coaching? Well, it's because he has put in however much work he's put in his own life to get to a point where he can consistently top a DLC. And therefore, if you want to know what he has learned, you need to pay for that information, right? And also, like another part of this conversation, it's not even just about like money, it's also just about time, right? I'm sure if anybody, you know, could, they would be coached by Zan. Why not? He's one of the best. It doesn't matter if you're also one of the best. Why not ask him his thoughts to get a different perspective? So if that was free, everybody would do it, and therefore nobody could get it because he just wouldn't have the time. By making it something that's paid, or putting it into the form of a paid guide where it's not he's literally sitting there with you, but you can read about his thoughts to understand it and go back and reference and employ in your own games. Now everybody has access to essentially Zan's coaching, but rather than making it free, he just gets to compensate himself for his time. And I do think in that aspect of it, I don't see anything wrong with somebody wanting to be compensated for their time, their knowledge, their energy, and their wisdom and experience. That's what we do all the time in life. And I think that's what
I mean, if you
work a job, you are paid for your expertise and your knowledge, right? Like, go ahead. Sorry, I just had to say that.
If you open yourself up to a situation where you say, I'm going to release this guide for free, right? Any guide, not Zan specifically.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to release something for free into the universe, then I kind of like owe it to everyone that has read it and taken part in it to help them, right? Or if I say, hey, I'm going to do free coaching, all of a sudden, do I have time to coach, I don't know, 500 people a month? No, I don't, right? So you're also weeding down the amount of people that you have a responsibility to. Not only that, you're only going to get the people that are very serious because they actually have something vested in it. There's people at locals, right? Like James, for instance, who I've mentioned tons of times. He's on the Forbidden Mountain now, who I spent time teaching him, and he took the information and ran with it and was very successful. There's other people at my locals who I have had the same exact coaching session with 4 times now, and you know, they have nothing vested into it and they never learn, and it's just they don't care, you know. And it's very frustrating because I've spent, you know, maybe 4 hours with these people and it was free. But you know, it's frustrating for me because I wasted my time, and it's frustrating for them because they all of a sudden think it's my responsibility, when at the end of the day they had nothing vested. So they might play in a set champs, not do well, and then not play again until the very next set champs.
Yeah, so I think the thing about paywalling and whether or not it's a problem, I think ultimately just comes down to it's up to you what you value, and so therefore you have to use your discretion whether or not paying for something like a Metafy guide or one-on-one individual coaching is worth it to you. At least speaking to the part where people are like, well, this is bad info. Anybody is just throwing up a guide now and making money off of it when they don't even have, let's say, accolades or you know, proof of concept to show that like their guide is worth any money. Well, the good news is that people who are putting up bad guides, according to, you know, some people, you simply just don't have to pay for it. And the good news is that that bad info, so to speak, is not readily available. So I'm not saying I don't understand the frustration. I get it. You know, if you're seeing somebody who's putting out a guide and you're like, why are people buying this? This is so ridiculous. Why is this in the community? I think the good news is like, yes, while that may be frustrating, the good news is just that like at least that bad information isn't being spread publicly. It's only going to the people who want to buy it. But I think also what's part of really this, you know, discussion is like why it's frustrating is because it's less helpful for the community. The good news about that as well is like not everybody is going to charge money for their guides. And so like if you don't appreciate that people like DKP or Zan Syed or people with bad info are charging for their guides, people like Artabax or Harlan Sweet have been very public and open about like their deck lists. I think even like the Forbidden Mountain, like yes, there are some Metafy guides which they like specifically specialize in, like that purple steel or amethyst steel.
It all depends on how much time is put into it.
Exactly.
Honestly.
Yeah, right. So like not all of that information is kept private. There's some that are very public. And so we saw, like, I think the first time I saw an Emerald Sapphire list was from the Forbidden Mountain, and they were like, "Hey, we came up with this. It did well." You know, so not everything is paywalled, and if you want information that is free, there are avenues and creators that you can support that will give you that free content and that free knowledge, right? And so it's not to say that somebody like Artabax is better than somebody like Zan because he's offering his like information for free, because Artabax is being compensated for his knowledge just in the form of, like, let's say ad revenue, right? And I think actually Artabax does have a Metafy guide, so that's neither here nor there. But like the point is, like, you know, like his new, like, let's say like blue steel list or sapphire steel list is like public info, right? Like without, like, you know, having to go to Metafy for. So I think it's just to say that, like, ultimately talking about the good of paywall, at least the good is that people like Zan Syed, Artabax, DKP can continue putting their all into finding, like, the ins and outs of this game, understanding, creating the best deck lists, because they are now being paid for their time through Metafy. So they don't have to, let's say, commit all of their time to a traditional full-time job. They can focus solely on Lorcana, solely on breaking the meta, solely on understanding different matchups, because people are paying them, you know, a livable wage, I suppose, in order to find that information, right? Zan would not have as much time to dedicate to Lorcana if he was not being compensated by his Metafy guides and his coaching, right? And so while some people want to argue, well, this is actually less helpful for the community because now we're all gatekeeping, I would argue it's kind of better for the community, because now we have people who are, their sole interest and their quote unquote job is understanding and creating new decks and breaking the meta and finding out new things for us, right? So I don't think it's all bad. Anything else you think about all that?
Yeah, there's a couple things. Like, let's say I want to replace an electrical outlet in my house, right? There are YouTube videos that can teach me that for free, right? Or I could just go straight to an expert and spend the money not having to learn it, and then going out and getting the parts I need or ordering them, whatever. I can just call up an electrician and pay a premium to have it done right, and I can have it done now. Okay, so let's look at Zan's blue steel deck, right? Sure. He was registering that in the SSG. As soon as you register a deck at a tournament, it is now tournament material, right? SSG owns that deck list when you turn that deck list in. So what he was really charging was like, hey, if you're going to SSG, if you're going to the Encounter, if you're going to any of these premium tournaments this weekend, you can pay to get this ahead of time. Not only that, I mean, like, I've seen people at locals playing the deck and they have no clue what they're doing. And it might take them a month to figure out how to play it perfectly. Or they could just not spend a month of their life and they could spend whatever it costs for the guide, right? This is literally how books work. Like, that's another industry. It's like, this is just how books work. I don't like guides that you have to pay per chapter, right? Especially if it's not done yet. But on Metafy, when you buy a guide, you get all the remaining chapters for free forever.
And if they ever update it, absolutely.
Yes. Like, I one thing that did happen in the picking community was that people would be strung along for months and months on Patreon and get a little bit of information at a time, whereas Metafy guides are very much so just like a book. Like, you're getting all the information. If new information comes, you don't have to buy the second edition of the book. It's just there, right? Coaching is another thing, though, where, like, you know, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, I don't know, going to a restaurant. Like, if you have a bad experience, just don't go back. You know what I mean? If you have a good experience, then keep supporting it. And another thing that I think people aren't realizing is that some people want to support their favorite content creators, okay?
But absolutely. People, just for the love of the content, you know?
Right. But some people will never, ever just, like, super chat $20 or, like, you know, do 10 Twitch subscriptions or whatever. They want to get something out of it as well. And that's where merchandising, that's where these guides, and that's where coaching comes into play. Like before James was on the Forbidden Mountain, he said to me, bro, wait, let me get my James voice. Bro, I love you guys' videos. How can I support in some way? You know? And I'm like, I don't just buy a random guide or something, buy a t-shirt. He's like, all right, bet. You know? Like people just want the stuff to keep going. Even the free YouTube content, at the end of the day, it's not free.
Right.
If you watch our last video, you spent an hour of your life. You could have worked at McDonald's for $15, right?
Right.
Well, state depending. So everything has a cost, whether it's opportunity or monetary. Monetary cost, you can almost bet that it is worth the monetary cost. And at the end of the day, if it wasn't, like, there's a review button on Metafy.
Yeah.
It's just like if you're buying a book based on the cover, maybe the book sucks. You know, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just the risk that you take with anything in life. Getting some sushi at the gas station might be great. You might end up in the hospital. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think like the biggest thing about like really just like even about like the two of us and our opinion on this, we don't have this opinion because we like secretly hope to be able to like put out guides and make money in the future. It's truly just because like it's the same thing, and I told Dick about this when we were like talking about broaching this topic, was like we're very vocal about the idea that like some people hate sharks for like set champs, and they hate the idea that people go to 1 million set champs, you know, and or like let's say like 5 to 10 set champs and win every single one. And while we understand the frustration, we will never advocate for like those players' rights to like do that be taken away, right? Like we do believe, regardless of how it feels, that people should be able to go to 20 set champs, because if they're paying for it and they're willing to drive, that's their right. We're not saying that it doesn't feel bad, you know what I mean? But like it's someone's right. And just like in that same vein, it's not that we're shills and we're shilling for our teams or TFM or, you know, Zan Syed or whatever it is. It's not that we're like some fanboys who want to shill for all these people. What it is that we just believe in like the idea that people should be allowed to charge for that information if they feel it is valuable and want to be compensated for that time. And just like they should be allowed to do that without being labeled as like villains of the Lorcana community, you watching this video, the consumer of those of those, you know, guides, can choose where to put your money and whether or not you pay for something. And so like if you don't want Metafy to take off, don't put money into it, and maybe those guides won't be bought, and maybe they will find a different way to monetize. But like the people who are willing to pay for that, that's their right as well, you know? And so at the end of the day, it's crazy when we talk about some of these topics. Like you think it's so simple, but then you see the discussions and it's like, well, people hadn't considered that they can just not give their money towards something, and that like the information will get there regardless. Eventually, you know, whether you pay for it or not, sure, it's going to become public knowledge, some of these things. But if you want to, like you said, you know, you can take a month to learn the deck, or you can expedite that. And so that's all we're really saying here is like, it's their right to put those guides up the same way it is your right to not like it and to not engage with it and to not support it. Right. So I really think that's where it leaves here.
I don't subscribe to any Metafy.
Neither do I.
I don't get any coaching. I barely watch any other content. And for the most part, for me, it's because I don't want that to accidentally bleed into like what I'm saying. Like, I want to form my own opinion instead of hearing everyone else's, right? And especially when it comes to making content, I don't want to end up like being a parrot of what someone else says. If I said the same thing as them, awesome, because that means I'm probably on the right track and I got there by like doing the work. It's like when you went to math class and your teachers like show the work, and then like some people like I can actually be like, well, this is where I started and this is the journey I came to this conclusion.
Right.
But if I didn't have YouTube or anything like that to think about, then yeah, like I'm a pretty busy person. I could totally see myself like getting coached by some of the best players. Like at the end of the day, the cost is so low just to try it even once. George, when he was on TFM, he would get coaching just because he's like, listen, like $60 to listen to one of the smartest people for 2 hours, sure. Like, if I learn nothing, that's okay.
And the review buttons there. Yeah. So I think that's really, where we feel about it. Obviously, we respect everyone's opinions on this. It's a heated topic. Some people really were upset about this. And so I think for the people that were really disheartened and just didn't understand it, we wanted to just kind of talk about why this happens and acknowledge those problems that people feel about it, but also show a different perspective that it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom, and there can actually be a reason behind this, and it can be productive and helpful for certain community members that have the resources to be able to do that. And if you don't have the resources, there are free things out there for you. Before we completely close this out, one last thing that I think is worth talking about, at least for us, because we're on the content side of things in addition to being players, is it was brought up whether or not, per the Ravensburger rules, if things like Metafy guides and paying for content and all of that stuff is allowed. There was a screenshot provided that's on the website. Anybody could look it up, basically saying, you are expressly prohibited from charging for this content. That is like the Ravensburger
for fan-made content.
Fan-made content. Thank you. For fan-made content per the Ravensburger website. What do you think in terms of, does this cross the line, and is it not okay?
Okay, so obviously I can't speak for Ravensburger.
100%.
We're not representatives of Ravensburger.
This is just our opinion.
I'm also not a shill for Ravensburger. I've criticized them many times in the past. Let's say Bic Derns had a Bic Derns trading card game, okay? If I see Metafy popping off and people are buying guides and people are getting coaching and stuff like that, I think that's great for my game. At the end of the day, I think that's going to encourage people to continue to play the game. I mean, one big reason people quit playing the game is they show up to things like set championships and they never win, right? Whereas if someone is going out purposefully trying to get better at the game, that means that they're investing in the game for the long term, right? And the long-term health of my trading card game, I think, is good for me. And if we look at Magic the Gathering, who has been the biggest trading card game basically forever, it's so prevalent there, and they have almost the same exact rules, almost verbatim, just like Google Magic's content creation rules, and it's almost the same, right? And it has never been a problem in that community, and Magic is absolutely huge. One thing that Ravensburger has going for it is it gets to see 30 years of success of other trading card games, and it can pick and choose what it wants from each. And then, if I had a fan content, which personally I don't think coaching or Metafy guides or anything like that is fan content. I don't think it is for someone who's just a fan of the game. I think it is for someone who is deeply invested into the game. So it's helpful that it is ambiguous. And at the end of the day, if someone were to actually print a book and included, the actual art of the cards and stuff like that, Ravensburger can be like, hey, we're shutting this down. This is our trademark. You don't have permission to use it in this way. But if it were me, I would say keep on going, except not say it publicly. I would just ignore everything. But in the back end, I'd be like, sounds great. Thank you for advertising our game for us.
Yeah, at the end of the day, this is our opinion, but it's also the concept of fair use, which we have, at least here in the US, and we're talking about the Ravensburger NA rules. And so under fair use, I don't believe personally, I'm not a lawyer, that they're infringing upon, Ravensburger's, IP and card game by just sharing their thoughts on how to use the cards. And so in that way, we also just wanted to kind of quickly address that and say, at least for us, we see it as a non-issue. And I think ultimately, we've talked about this before with things. If Ravensburger has a problem, let Ravensburger deal with it. It's not up to us to grab our pitchforks and be like, hey Ravensburger, this one right here, Zan Syed. It's hey, it's just, if they have a problem, Lord knows they can get in contact with him, right? He's won so many events, I'm sure they have been in contact with him. That's up to them. And us as a community, I understand, wanting to keep things in good faith and good and appropriate. But I think, this one's out of our league. It's not for us to deal with. let the Disney heads deal with all that. We just get to, you know, consume and enjoy the content, and really for as long as we want, as long as it's not an issue, right? So only good things can come.
I would like to end this podcast on one word, and that word is capitalism.
Need we say more? You put your money where you think it should go.
Yep, you vote with your money.
Yep. All right, so I think that's gonna be it from us. Dear Lord, I hope you watched this video before you commented that we're just shills and we're hypocrites, because I don't think we are. But
you know what, a lot of people, I'm gonna give us pats on the back. A lot of people say the only reason they watch is because we are like way too honest. To a fault. Honestly.
We were worried to talk about this, but I was like, you know what, this is the brand, this is what we do. We have to be honest about what's going on in the community. So we try to represent the players, and if this is what we see people are talking about, this is what we want to talk about. So in that vein, if you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe. Only 75% of people who watch this video aren't subscribed. Actually, sorry. So like 25% of you are only subscribed. So please subscribe. And also, if there are other things that like you want us to talk about that we haven't talked about yet, let us know. If there's things that, you know, the community really care about and want to hear our opinion on, we would love more ideas and more things to talk about. So thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.